Hello, and welcome to How It's Done, a podcast about how real people do actual things to move their brands and their businesses forward. From the simplest of tactics to the most advanced tools and technologies, we go behind the buzzwords to understand the how. Have you ever seen or read or heard about someone or some company that did something really cool and you wondered, yeah, but how did they do it? Yeah, me too, so here we are. Are you curious? I'm about as curious as they come. So stick around, we'll be curious together, and I promise we'll learn stuff. How It's Done is brought to you by Fuoco, a marketing agency that knows when and how to ignite the spark. I'm Christy Goad, and I'll be your host. Welcome to the show. In this episode of How It's Done, I'm here with Mr. Scott Becker. Scott is a graduate of Harvard Law School. He's the founder and publisher of Becker's Hospital Review, and he is a nationally recognized healthcare lawyer at McGuireWoods. Scott, welcome.
Christy, thank you for having me, and always a pleasure to get a chance to visit with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Today with Scott, we're going to cover how he actually came to form one of healthcare's most widely read and recognized media brands today, known as Becker's Healthcare. Scott, I recently listened to another new podcast featuring a conversation with you. It was the Thought Leadership podcast with Jay Harrington. And in that, you were talking about how to build a thriving legal practice with thought leadership, which you've certainly done. We'll include a link to that in our show notes, but just for the record, I think it's a really great one and one that's very relevant and related to what we're going to talk about here today. So folks that are listening, you can find that at hcommunications.biz/the Thought Leadership Project. And again, we'll include that in the show notes, but I thought that was a great sort of segue into what we're going to talk about today, Scott. And I'll dive into a little bit about it, not just from the thought leadership perspective, but was there another impetus for you forming Becker's Healthcare, and where did you really get that idea and what got that off the ground for you?
Sure. No, it's a great question because like so many things in life, it really started as one thing and turned into another thing. When I originally started Becker's Healthcare, I was a young lawyer, and it was really part of a legal marketing effort to develop a legal practice. And over the course of probably now it's been 27 years, but over the course of years, it moved from being something that was a legal marketing effort to sort of build a brand in law, in healthcare law, and particularly early on in surgery centers, to something that became a real media company. And the transition really happened about 15 years ago when we started to expand out of surgery centers and into other areas, hospitals and health systems, orthopedics and spine, and started to hire great people full-time. Until about 15 years ago, I did everything myself and through an outsourcing company, and it wasn't until about 15, 16 years ago that we started hiring people full-time and going into other markets where it was no longer around legal marketing at all and more a true media company. And things built upon each other. When we started just in surgery centers, magnificent niche, still a great niche, still important to the Becker's Healthcare Company, and quite frankly, important to my own legal practice that I still somewhat maintain. But we expanded into the hospitals and health systems and orthopedics and spine now about 16 years ago, in part because we started to build a team. We needed more inventory and more to do to maintain great staff and great talent. So there were multiple different things that came together. We also looked at it with our then employee, now CEO and partner, Jessica Cole, who really has done a tremendous job of driving the growth of Becker's Healthcare. She was recently named the Ernst & Young Transformative CEO of the Year. So that's how much she's transformed the thing and how much credit she deserves for what we've done. But at some point we sat down and did a very simple business plan, as I do most things, and we decided between two different types of media companies. We didn't want to be one that was in 20 different segments and weak in 16 and deep in 3, but we also couldn't afford to be just in one segment. So we ended up expanding into a few other segments beyond surgery centers, and as it's turned out, the hospital and health system area is now 80% plus of the company, with health IT a very, very important part of that and of the company as well. So it's really those two things now lead the charge for the company, but the impetus was not to build a media company. It became to build a media company probably 10, 15 years after founding the company. Christy, let me turn it back to you so I don't keep on just talking. So let me turn it back to you.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fascinating story. And as someone, I've lived on the other side of that fence oftentimes early in my career, working for healthcare companies internally in the corporate communications role and pitching Becker's Healthcare story ideas to gain coverage, and now leading my own marketing practice, working on behalf of clients, doing that very thing. So it's very interesting to hear the evolution of Becker's Healthcare from both a brand building perspective as well as now a media company. And I am curious, healthcare it's a vast industry, but also it's an interestingly small industry, especially when you start looking at hospitals and health systems and health IT. There's a lot of the same people, it's sort of small circles, if you will. And so while there's a whole lot of companies, there's a pretty small media universe to pitch. And I'm curious how Becker's Healthcare balances that in terms of covering the things that are worth covering and that are interesting, and, making sure you are providing that depth. But then you must have to turn people away too, because you must get inundated with pitches from the PR teams of healthcare companies across the country.
Sure. So there's 3 or 4 things that sort of come with the question that you're asking. One is sort of, we kept on doubling down in just the niches we're in rather than trying to be in all niches. So many companies are all over the board. We try to be very focused just in the 4 areas we're at. Then we try and constantly understand who is our real reader, who is someone you're writing for. So if they're writing in the hospital sort of publication and they're writing for our hospital CEO report, they're really writing for the CEO, or they're really writing for the CFO. And so the concept is we're really looking for the news that's most critical for that person, whoever our audience is, for whatever particular vertical that we're in. So we're very focused on that vertical. In terms of sort of filtering out news versus pitches, over the years, we've become increasingly disciplined about it. As we became far more a journalist organization, and we're really driven by content, and a magnificent editorial team led by Molly Gamble, Laura Durda, Ayla Ellis, and Emily Rapply, Kenzie Morgan, and a handful of others. As we became much more content-driven, we became much more disciplined, too, about, their job is to really filter out what's news and what's not news. So anybody who's pitching something from an advertiser always tries to sell to our people that this is news, not advertising, or news, not a commercial interest. When we've gotten better at deciphering, is this something our reader, our core reader, really will find interesting, or is just more sort of commercial noise? And it's a constant sort of bridging and discussion. We're very good about trying never to impose on our writers commercial interest. And probably 10 years ago, we weren't as disciplined about that. And as we've grown and matured, we've gotten better and better at it. And so they really have lots of discretion to filter out whether they like a pitch or not a pitch and whether to listen to it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm also curious then, what is your role in the editorial component of Becker's Healthcare today? Is it more of a leadership and overall guidance, and you're kind of hands-off day-to-day?
Sure. So it's a real mix. I oversee, in total, I'm quote-unquote the publisher and quote-unquote chief content officer. But my job is really making sure, as is the job of our editors-in-chief and the job of our conference programmers, the 2 areas that I have lots of input into are overall 6 main conferences a year, which are the very, very core part of our Becker's Healthcare business, and then our editorial arm, which is the daily newsletters we provide in our websites and so forth. We have great leadership in the conference side, women Jessica Young and Sophie Lenzen, that really put together the core of the agendas, and then I'm able to have discussions with them about making sure we maintain the right discipline of being very provider-centric versus commercial-centric, and just make sure we're hitting the right subjects, the right talking points, the right everything, but they really drive the day-to-day agendas. So at the end of the day, my core job there would be some oversight, but as they've matured and grown, my job becomes less and less critical because they're so good at what they do. And in the editorial team, it's very much the same thing. My job is to make sure we've got great lead editors in place. And that job is really first and foremost the job of Molly Gamble today. And then my job is to make sure with Molly and Lauren team that we're hitting the right content, that we're the right sort of sharpness, not softness, but the right mix of teach and entertain, which we call it. Teach meaning give people the core business they have to have, and also interesting. And so my role has evolved, and as we develop more mature teams, my role is very much an oversight role, a clarity role. We've got great people in place in leadership that really drive the day-to-day of what has to be done.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you is, and it sounds like this also applies to your legal practice, be niche, be disciplined, really focus on your core audience and understand what it is they're interested in and want to know, and really provide them with great content, and then get great people in place who know what they're doing and provide great leadership. And then certainly for Becker's Healthcare, bring the right mix of teach and entertain, which I think is super important in today's digital landscape for media.
Yes, no, I think you've captured it right on. I mean, everything starts, and it's an old adage, with great people. You can't do anything without great people. And even in today's world where the media world is so democratized, it's just very hard to do anything substantial without great people and great team. And it's the same thing in the legal practice. I had a nice little small practice, but it wasn't until I started adding great lawyers to that practice that it became a great practice. And it's really the same thing. And it's in that area of the world is very, very, very focused on our core client base and trying to be the best lawyers for that core client base, not trying to be all things to all people. And it's a very similar type of method of building, method of watching things, method of growing things, and the same kind of discipline. Very customer-centric, who's our core customer or who's our core client, and very niche discipline. We're very much in surgery centers and hospitals. In the legal practice, the group, not until myself, although I touch in it, is very invested in the healthcare private equity world. Similarly, when you look at the media company, we're very vested in 4 different niches. It's not that we don't periodically explore some others, but it's very focused on those 4. And so that's sort of how we look at it and how we approach things.
Got it. So, Scott, among the many things you've done to diversify and grow and evolve through the years, you've recently become super active in the podcast space. Can you talk to us about the different podcasts that you currently host, and how is it that you keep changing with the cultural, business, and media landscape? How do you stay up on it all?
Sure. There's multiple questions based on that, and I'll just talk for a moment. Our CEO and I, Jessica Cole, one of the things I pride Jessica on is staying closely attuned to all things going on in our business. And so we've been able to stay very focused on a core, which is to make sure we're the leading place in digital for what we do and leading events for what we do. And at the same time, evolve and pivot as things evolve and change over the years. And that was easier for me, 20 years ago than it is today. But we do try and stay constantly attentive to what's going on in the landscape and how you pivot and how you stay relevant and important. In terms of the Becker's Healthcare, we've over the years, of course, we never were big on print, always wanted to win in digital, always wanted to win in events. And that was a good thought and a very important thought as we evolved, because there was a major print competitor who's just great at it. And we never wanted to be the total leader in print. It's hard to win and it's very expensive, all kinds of things, and our audience didn't want it nearly as much. The pivot to sort of, and this isn't really a pivot, it's just an inclusion of another issue, which is our podcast. The podcast, we believe, are just, as much as anything, a wonderful way to stay connected with our audience and talk with a core part of our constituency. So at Becker's Healthcare, we do 2 types of podcasts, a core Becker's Healthcare podcast. We also focus on Becker's Healthcare Women's Leadership podcast. And really both are aimed at the same thing, at great leaders in healthcare and staying closely connected to the healthcare community, whether the audience, most importantly, the healthcare leadership and executives, meaning of large health systems. So I had the great pleasure in the last couple of weeks to interview the CEO of UCLA Health, Jenny Spizo, the CEO of Hospital for Special Surgery, now known as HSS, Louis Shapiro, the CEO of a great health system in Chicago that's a safety net hospital system, Karen Teitelbaum, just a number of great chances to speak with leaders in healthcare and stay connected to what's a core part of our constituency. And, on top of everything else, Christy, as you know, we enjoy it tremendously. So it's a great chance to visit with people. I enjoy connecting with people. I'm, unfortunately, no longer in the daily grind of writing 10 articles a day or speaking to 40 clients a day. So I have the ability to do this and enjoy it and engage in it, and it allows us to stay close with important constituencies within Becker's Healthcare. Outside of Becker's Healthcare, completely outside of healthcare, we're also doing podcasts around business leadership and around women's leadership. I had the fortunate gift to have the CEO of my company, Evolve, and who is a woman, be a partner of mine for a very long period of time, and also be the CEO of my company. I had the great fortune early on to develop lots of partners in my law firm that were women leaders, and never had a bias one way or the other towards women or men leaders. Think both can be fantastic, and judge it both equally. The Women's Leadership Podcast is just a great pleasure to engage with lots of interesting people. There's a very interesting connected audience to it. It's not really through the Becker's Women's Leadership Podcast, the Becker Group C-Suite Reports, business leadership. We've not really turned those into business at all. Obviously, at Becker's Healthcare, it's a business. On the other side of the table, it's not a business, but it just is an absolute pleasure to engage with so many interesting people. I mean, I get to know people in a way that I otherwise wouldn't. So a person like yourself, we communicated by email for years. You've made pitches to Becker's Healthcare. Would have never had a chance to really get a chance to talk to you in any depth, but for doing a podcast with you. And there's a lot of that out there. It's just a really interesting way to communicate with people. We hope that listeners come away learning something from them, a little bit more motivated, a little bit more inspired. And that's really our core goals of the podcast. It's just a pleasure. And it's an evolution as to where the media world's gone to. So that's let me turn it back to you. But that's sort of how we evolved in this stuff and how, it's key. Great leadership. Amber Walsh in the healthcare practice, Jessica Cole in Becker's Healthcare, that are so in tune with what's going on in the market that we make the pivots we need to make.
Well, it must be a lot of fun to be able to do that and have those kinds of conversations. And yeah, podcasting is a great medium to be able to do that. I have a question for you. With so much going on and all the different things on your plate, even though you just shared with us that you do now, you're not having to write 10 articles a day and speak to 10 or 20 clients a day. Congratulations. Good for you. But I still imagine you must get hundreds of emails and calls a day from people wanting either your time or your help or something from you. And yet, for as long as I've ever known you, I've known you to be super responsive, super personal. I'm curious, and I bet our listeners would be curious, how do you stay on top of the work and stay so personally involved in it and do so in a way that seems so simple and easy?
Well, there's a number of different systems and thoughts and ideas and process and all that stuff, but it really comes down to, at the end of the day, I very much enjoy interacting with people, and so it's like somebody commented very nicely about me about how he always finds time for people, and it's not because I'm so generous, so altruistic, so anything. I personally enjoy it, so I like to be connected. I like to know what's going on. I feel very disconnected when I don't know what's going on, and I just enjoy talking to people. So, I love, Chris, I've got to know you some. I love getting a chance to visit with you. I love having you on our podcast. I love talking to you, but I generally enjoy people. And so it's, and I don't have, a long time ago, we ended up with great people in place leading the various organizations I'm a part of. So communication and talking to people is not a burden for me. It's a pleasure. And it's not. It's very natural to me. I enjoy it. So I don't know. And I'm able to do it because I've got great teams that support everything that we all do. That McGuireWoods is magnificent. It's a 1,000-lawyer organization, magnificent organization. Becker's Healthcare's got a great team. So I'm able to do what I love doing, in part because we've got great people in place doing the right things. And then in terms of filtering out, over the years, we've gotten, we don't believe things have to be a quid pro quo. What we do believe is that things have to be mutual respect. And so we've gotten better about people that are great clients, people that are pleasant people, whether or not they're clients or business colleagues. We enjoy interacting with them, and you come across in life people that are givers, people that are takers. And I think we've probably, as organizations, or at least I can't speak for the organizations, but as people, gotten better at clarifying who is just a taker versus who is, where there's some, it doesn't have to be a quid pro quo, but there's some mutual respect for what we all do. And so we enjoy those people far more. And my judgment on it's not always perfect. There's people that I sort of, wouldn't have thought would have been great colleagues who turned out to be magnificent people, just wonderful. And I'm sure I've made judgments the other way as well. But you have to make some judgments as to how you spend your time, who you spend your time with. And, like in the media business, if we have 800 advertisers, we spend the vast majority of our time as an organization with 100 to 200 that pay the bills, that really keep the lights on. In the legal practice, you might have X numbers of clients, but they're 5, that if you don't really take care of those clients, the lights don't stay on. And I assume it's the same with, your business. The marketing and PR and branding firm that you have, if you don't take care of the 10 clients that pay 80% of the bills, you're no longer going to be in business. So there is some filtering like that as well, but it really comes down to mutual respect, people that you enjoy working with. And I personally, the responsiveness comes easy to me because I enjoy it tremendously. And so it's, and then there's
an extreme extrovert.
I like to think that my success has come from this ability to mix personal skills with analytical skills, with both being bright and having good personal skills. When we look at people in the law firm that have been hyper successful, there's 3 great qualities of people: that they are motivated, and you can't do anything unless they're motivated and somewhat motivated. Second, they have great analytical skills. And third, they have great personal skills. And those are not in any particular order, but those are the 3 characteristics of success. We'll find people that if they're hyper extroverted, but they can't support it with analytical or some kind of brights and sharps, then they're sort of an empty talking suit. We find people that are extremely bright, that don't have great personal skills. They still can be crazily important to organizations, crazily useful, but there's certain things they won't be able to do as well unless they develop those management and personal skills that are so important. So we like to think of, I am an extrovert. When I am too busy and not doing enough analytical, thoughtful work, then it can become like an organization where marketing gets ahead of its execution. And so we try and never fall into that category. We try and mix that level of analytical efforts and discipline to go with extroversion and enjoying people.
Those are some great pieces of advice, especially when you're in the professional services realm, which you and I find ourselves in, legal and marketing and public relations. I also think part of what you described is you have to have a level of intellectual curiosity along with those skills, being motivated, and personal skills and analytical skills. And that's how I describe this podcast. How it's done is a podcast for curious marketers. So it sounds like you were describing earlier, a level of curiosity and just interest that you have in not only people, but in your industry and in learning new things. And I wonder if you have, there was some great advice you just shared. Is there any specific advice you might have for us marketing and PR types trying to do for our clients' brands, what you've been able to do for your own brand, both personally and for your firm?
No, it's a great question. And so let me try and break it down in a couple different thoughts. I mean, we take this position of being what we call customer-centric. And, of course, it's just a name, it's just a title. But the concept is it's really to take care of your top customers and your core customers, how you want to be taken care of. And it's a crazy amount of responsiveness. Like I say, too, I've got a young person who was talking to me about a job search. And this goes into the concept of, constantly trying to be communicative, trying to talk, and trying to exhibit the drive that you need for success. It's a very competitive, very challenging world today. And communication skills and wanting to talk, like in applying for a job, you can't try and be cool. Cool is fine in certain contexts, but in applying for a job, serving a client, you've got to try and be great. You can't be afraid to try too hard. And you've got to be really smart about what you do and really effective. you have to be so good that they want to constantly come back to you. And part of that is great analytical skills, great communication skills, and great taking care of them, really feeling like they're being taken care of. We would look at it, differentiate lawyers or customer account leaders and so forth. Certain lawyers are willing, and it's all within reason, to sit on the phone with the client and really talk through issues and really counsel them. Other lawyers feel like they've always got to run to go do something. And while we all internally probably feel like the latter, we have to go run and do the next thing, it's being on the phone with somebody when you're talking to a client, for example, they have to believe, and everybody loves the adage that you're my only client in the world, but we know it's not true. But they have to believe that you really are comfortable spending time with them and they're valuable enough to really spend the time with. Whether you're getting paid or not for the time really doesn't matter. There's a perception in how you approach people that gives off that ear or not. And we sort of think this is all part of this customer-centricness, that you really do have the time and energy for someone and you're really trying to be great at what you do. I mean, those are sort of at least two sort of core points. And the third core point is it's okay to work too hard. It's yes, always trying to find the simplest way to get something done well, but it's okay to work hard. And I think you do have every generation as they get out of school has a wake-up call as to what it really takes to succeed at work versus school. And we see sort of that evolution. It's not too different with professionals of all levels. There's a certain amount of effort that it takes to great at what you do, and also enjoying the client, empathetically being with the client. We have a great leader who used to work with, Paul Summerside. He used to say there were hospital administrators that didn't like their physicians and employees, and he would say it's like a lion tamer that was scared of lions. It's a bad combination. You have to actually enjoy in the marketing spot your clients, in the legal spot your clients. As a hospital administrator, you got to enjoy the people you work with, because if you don't, people know it, and nobody likes that. Anyways, Christy, let me turn it back to you before I keep on just talking.
No, that's fantastic and so true. We have a motto at Quoco where it's basically no toxic people and no toxic clients, because what we find, and I think it's similar to what you've just been expressing, is if that's the case, there's no amount of hard work and customer service and everything that you do for someone or somebody or, a client or an individual that's ever going to make them happy. So I love what you said about it's okay to work hard. I'm a firm believer in that myself. And obviously the success that you've been able to have and the reputation that you've built as a lawyer as well as a publisher speaks for itself in that regard. And that's, I'm sure, been an extreme amount of hard work on your part over the years and I highly recognize. So I really appreciate your time today, and I appreciate your honesty and transparency and all the great advice that you've shared with us. This may be a tough question to end on, but I like to end with what I call kind of a burning question. Since all of the different things that you've talked about today really do ladder back to the healthcare industry, I'm curious what you think is maybe one of the most interesting or either healthcare mergers and acquisitions that's happened or that's anticipated to happen in the healthcare industry, or maybe just an interesting trend that you're seeing.
Sure. Trends out there are so many complicated trends that it's hard to talk about. You talk about one very quickly in terms of trends in healthcare. The biggest trend I see in healthcare that's the most important to our generation, the next generation, will be the trend towards precision medicine and really building medicine specific for a person. And you might not see this for small things, but for big things like cancer, this precision medicine will be the biggest game changer we've seen in our generation, and you're already starting to see it. You'll start to think of certain things that were done in healthcare and cancer and oncology treatment is almost like primitive compared to what's going on in the next 10 to 15 years. So I think that's sort of the biggest overall exciting trend. It's not a trend that touches every one of us, but it touches a lot of us, and it's fascinating to see the evolution there that's been talked about for a long time, but you really see it firsthand now. So that's one trend. In terms of big mergers, and you asked me about that as well, the biggest, most interesting merger, and that I cheer for and I see having great success for the long run, is the merger of CHI and Dignity Health into CommonSpirit. It's led by two remarkable leaders, Kevin Lofton and Lloyd Dean, who are both on the Becker Healthcare Advisory Board, is my discussion, but they're really, for all practical purposes, voluntary advisors to our Becker Healthcare Advisory Board. They've merged together to become a $30 billion plus Catholic health system, probably the second largest not-for-profit health system in the country after Kaiser Permanente. They've taken on a very difficult challenge in that they try and do magnificent things both in great affluent communities in great non-affluent communities, and they're doing a wonderful job of trying to make this merger work and develop and grow. And it's a fascinating thing that they are trying to do, and try and be part of the healthcare landscape. They're now in 26, 27 states. It's a $30 billion plus organization. They came out of the combination of CHI and Dignity Health, and I literally think they're two of the finest people we know, two of the best people we know, and we see them and hope that they will have in this combined merger organization, CommonSpirit, great success. It's an organization where they both have great margin efforts, but their mission thoughts on trying to do the right thing and be great people and take care of communities is so in the right spot that we just look so forward to their success in what they're doing. So the trend would be that precision medicine, which we're seeing crazy changes in, and will make some of cancer care look almost primitive just about 10 years from now, I think, and even today, as we see some of the things that are going on with it. And then the one merger, and it might not be the most exciting merger, Aetna, CVS, et cetera, but I think in some ways just creating the largest not-for-profit system in the country besides Kaiser and next to Kaiser, and what they're trying to do and how they care about people, both their employees and their communities. And there's so much of that in health. There's so much of the great leadership is mission-driven as well as trying to make sure the margins work. And I see Kevin and Lloyd, I applaud what they're doing and wish them great luck with it. So, Chris, I hope that helps. And I've, of course, answered two of your questions because I can't help myself. So thank you.
Well, those were fantastic. And I know that I speak for myself and probably anyone that's listening that we look forward to Becker's coverage of those mergers and acquisitions and hopefully the success that we will see from those. It's a very difficult thing to merge and integrate and then bring that new vision to life, but it sounds like they've got the right people at the helm to be able to do that. So we look forward to your ongoing coverage of that. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to add? And then also, if you can let folks know the best way to get in touch with you, although you're everywhere, so it's pretty easy to find you, but let us know the best way.
Sure. Thank you. So you reach me at either sbecker at McGuireWoods.com or sbecker at BeckersHealthcare.com. I'm on LinkedIn at Scott Becker, and that's always easy to find me. If people really want to, they can text me at 312-399-0774. And we always enjoy trying to figure out how we can help people and how we could relate to people and vice versa and so on. So, Christy, just a pleasure, and congratulations on your firm and what you're doing. Just fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Scott. That's a wrap-up of this episode of How It's Done. My guest today has been Scott Becker, founder and publisher of Becker's Healthcare and nationally recognized healthcare lawyer at McGuireWoods. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, Christy.
That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening. We're looking forward to keeping great conversations coming your way as we grow this podcast. There's even more great content from our conversations on our blog. Be sure to check it out at growwithfuoco.com. That's grow with Fuoco, FUOCO.com. Stay tuned until next time, and no matter what, stay curious.